that is set.
How did the Edward VII networks prevent the war from being brought to a close at the end of 1914, after the war plans of all the major powers had failed to deliver any results?
And we can certainly say that by the end of 1914, the German plan failed, the French plan failed, the Russian plan failed, the Austro-Hungarian plan failed. Only the British, who really had no plan, they were sitting pretty, because those three countries, France, Germany, and Russia, right, that could have allied against the British, are now tearing each other apart. So the idea is, in continental Europe at the end of 1914, there's this move of saying, okay, soldiers, okay, generals, field marshals, we gave you your chance. Now let's have peace, because it didn't work, did it? No, say the British, no. The British commander here is Lord Kitchener, and Lord Kitchener is a genocidal butcher. And he says, look, we British, we want to see France and Germany and Russia bleed each other white. We want to have a population war. You guys are going to take it on the chin. This is helped along by the fact that the British Expeditionary Force, about 110,000 men that they'd sent in at the beginning, has now been practically annihilated. So the British have lost their old army, but now there's nothing left to lose. So they'd rather see these other guys go on fighting. So they forced them to sign the Treaty of London, September 1914, saying nobody will have a separate peace with Germany, okay? And that's when they start calling themselves the Allies, right? Up to that point, they were the Entente. Now they're going to be the Allies, and with that, they're all locked into this suicidal course. And that's going to hold up until the Bolsheviks come along, right? Lenin and Trotsky finally say, in 1917, we're now Russia, and we're not going to be bound to this suicide pact. The other thing I would point to, Woodrow Wilson got a message from Morgan and from his ambassador in Britain saying, if you don't come in, then London will be bankrupt, Morgan will be bankrupt, the U.S. will be bankrupt, so you better come into the war on the side of the British, which is what Woodrow Wilson did, with the support, let me add, of Theodore Roosevelt, who is not such a great guy after all.
Well, how can you explain the willingness of these other countries to sign the suicide pact in London and refuse?
Well, at the beginning of the war, there's this hysteria, right? There's this notion that they're going to have, there's a huge wave of war hysteria. The entire irrationalism of 30 or 40 years of European history explodes, right? And September is precisely when all of them are making these grandiose plans. Right, the Germans say we're going to annex Belgium and we're going to annex this part of France, and the French say we're going to have Alsace-Lorraine and we're going to break Germany into parts, and on and on. So they're in the manic phase, a lot of them, right? But the ones with any brain say, let's call this off, and the British are there to enforce it. They say, you can't betray us. Look, you signed a treaty. You can't make a separate peace. And again, the first ones are the outcasts, Lenin and Trotsky.
How did the 1919 Peace of Paris, through the Treaty of Versailles with Germany, set the stage for Hitler and World War II? How did the 1919 Treaty of Sèvres draw the current map of the Middle East as a peace to end all peace? So the Peace of Paris, the Versailles Treaty, that was done in, 6 different parts?
It's the Peace of Paris is in 6 different parts. There's Versailles with Germany, Sèvres with Turkey, and then we have Neuilly with Austria, Trianon with Hungary, and Saint-Germain with Austria. I think I may get those wrong. It's hard to reel those off so fast, but those are the component parts of the Peace of Paris. Obviously, with Versailles, it's a Carthaginian peace, and above all, the reparations. Right, the war guilt, saying Germany has all the responsibility, not even the main responsibility, but the only responsibility. So they needed that. That's obviously a fraud, but they needed that to say, therefore you pay. Therefore you pay these huge reparations. The reparations were finally finished up by Germany a couple of years ago, just only yesterday, so to speak. So this is the main stuff, right? Hitler would then agitate saying the Diktat of Versailles, the war guilt clause, and the fact that we have to pay and we don't want to pay. And it sets the stage also for Mussolini, right, saying we didn't get our fair share at Versailles, so we're gonna try to take it. And then the Treaty of Sèvres, this breaks up the Ottoman Empire. The Treaty of Sèvres is basically what you see in crisis right now. in the Middle East. In other words, the countries that are on the map now go back to several. They actually go back to the Sykes-Picot Agreement of Britain and France, 1916, but that is then built into the Treaty of Sèvres. That's how it becomes binding. So the British get to dominate Egypt. Well, they had Egypt, but they get Palestine, they get Iraq, they get Saudi Arabia. The French get Lebanon and Syria, and they want to carve up Turkey, but Ataturk stops them. There's even an attempt to give the United States a piece of Turkey, which would have been absolutely insane and would have embroiled the U.S. in all kinds of wars for no reason. So you can look at this, right? Fromkin has this book, A Peace to End All Peace, that gives you sort of the idea that these countries, they all have the same problem, that the British and the French have promised the same territory to all kinds of different people. They promised them to the Jewish settlers of Palestine. They're told they're going to get independence. The Palestinian Arabs are told. The Arab tribes of Saudi Arabia, they're told. And then the populations of these other countries are told, you're going to be independent. And in reality, none of them are going to be independent. They're all going to be under the colonial rule mandates of the British and the French. So this powder keg you see in the Middle East, what ISIS is attacking is essentially the Versailles or Sèvres system.
Could you reiterate what were the long-term causes of World War I?
Again, it's this question of German industrialization overtaking the British, that the British had become a second-class industrial power compared to Germany and the United States. And that had consequences for the British Navy, but for the British world position. And remember, Edward VII told Germany, there are no frictions between us. In other words, there are no specific issues. There's only rivalry, which is a way of saying, you're too big, you're too powerful, you're independent. And I would compare that to how do we explain the irrational hatred and hysteria of the U.S. ruling class vis-a-vis Russia? Right? Why do they have this? Why do they hate Putin so much? It makes very little sense. Right? What are supposedly the issues between the real bilateral issues, right? Not third country issues, but U.S.-Russian bilateral issues? There are none. There's only rivalry. And that's what Baron Greinl said. Edward VII is busily organizing ententes all over the world to isolate and encircle Germany, but he's incapable of naming a single quarrel or issue that he might use to justify this. He just does it. It's the policy of these Freemasonic lodges.
Right. So we're talking about a rivalry for world domination. So that's
world domination, absolutely. That's the only issue, and they don't dare say that. In other words, Edward VII is not going to say, we want to dominate the world and we don't want to tolerate you. So I think that's quite similar to the U.S.-Russian relationship right now. And again, very scary.
What is a Freemason lodge? What do they do? What is the point?
It's people who come together for mutual support in their careers and in their projects, right? Well, the most famous example of recent years is the Italian P2 Lodge. You know that one? That's also the one that I've been able to study closest. The P2 Lodge in Rome was essentially people who supported the subordination of Italy to the United States, right? It was founded right after World War II, and it had all these people who were pro-American Italian politicians, bankers, editors, economists. I'm afraid there were church figures, right? Vatican types were in there, nobility, you name it. And it's to come together under the auspices that it's secret and that there is a ritual, right? There's some kind of, what can we say, satanic ritual? It depends on the lodge, right? Another one, Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is a Freemasonic lodge, absolutely clear, right? That may be the most famous one in the world. They don't call themselves that, but they are. That's a kind of Freemasonry above Freemasonry. Ron Paul is a Freemason, right? Ron Paul is a Scottish Rite Freemason, along with Jesse Helms, Trent Lott, you name it, those guys. Those are the Confederate Freemasons.
So this is basically, like a good old boy network, I guess you'd say.
Yes, but it's more formalized, and each lodge has a name. Like Edward VII was the Quatuor Coronati Lodge, the Four Crowned Heads, which refers to ancient history. We don't need to go through it. Or we can even find this guy Norman that I mentioned, the guy who is walking around in London on the day of Sarajevo, right? He says that he was invited to the founding of the British Grand Orient Lodge, which would have been a kind of a liaison lodge between London and the French Grand Orient. And of course, not just French, but Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Romanian, right? That whole world, right? The world of the Jacobins of France. So again, a lot of influential people from different walks of life who help each other. So in other words, what do you need? You need a judge, you need an editor, you need a police chief, you need a general, you need a bishop, right? So they're all in the lodge. They're all going to work together. Help you. If you get in trouble, if your career needs some help, they can mobilize it. But then you got to reciprocate. Otherwise, they kill you.
Webster Tarpley, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Webster Tarpley. Today's show has been Edward VII of Great Britain as the Precursor of World War I. Webster Tarpley is an economic historian, author, and lecturer. He is author of Against Oligarchy, Surviving the Cataclysm, a study of the world financial crisis, 9/11 synthetic terror made in the USA, Obama, the unauthorized biography, and Just Too Weird, Bishop Romney and the Mormon Takeover of America. Webster Tarpley is a leader and activist with United Front Against Austerity at againstausterity.org. Visit his website at tarpley.net. That's tarpley.net. Email him at tarpley@tarpley.net. Guns and Butter is produced and edited by Bonnie Faulkner and Yarrow Mako. To make comments or order copies of shows, email us at faulkner@gunsandbutter.org. That's FAULKNER@GUNSANDBUTTER.org. Visit our website at gunsandbutter.org.